The Pocono Mountain is the birthplace to a Pocono wonderland of untold pleasure.
Winter in the Poconos, clear and crisp.
Called the land of the waterfall.
A recipe for romance.
Hi everybody, welcome to Pocono Perspectives. We're so happy to have you watching PTN, the Pocono Television Network, wherever you're watching it. And if you've watched this show before, you know we bring you things about the Pocono community that are very, very important to us. This one is incredibly important on a number of different levels. First, we're going to talk about Juneteenth, which is an amazing holiday coming up, celebration I should say, rather than holiday. But also too, we're in an amazing structure, Bethel AME in Stroudsburg, PA, which we do want to get into a little bit more. But first I'd like to introduce my panel. Great folks who are going to walk us through the two things I just talked about. First, it's Cleo Kwanzaa Mama.
Yes.
I better get that right.
Hey,
Tamiko also to my right. Nichelle to my left. So the first thing I want to pose to the panel, Tamiko, I'm going to pose this to you if I could. What is Juneteenth and why is it celebrated?
So Juneteenth represents June 19th, 1865, and that's when the enslaved peoples in Galveston, Texas found out that they were free. They didn't know that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed nearly 2.5 years prior in 1863, but when they got the word, they were excited and Juneteenth celebrations ensued.
So now it's a federal holiday, correct?
That's correct.
But it was a state holiday first, Cleo, is that correct?
Correct.
And
June 19th, 2019, it was signed by Governor Wolf. I wanted to point out, this was the first time in a long time, I won't say ever, but in a very long time, that the legislators on both sides of the aisle agreed on something. It was unanimously voted on. And it was signed into law that it would be a state holiday. We were very excited.
so I know that Juneteenth was wasn't it a holiday, I don't know, I should use the word celebration in some states before it was a federal?
Many states. Yes, it's a big thing in New York City. They go to Coney Island at sunrise, and they stay on Coney Island all day, and all the different spiritual practices and ancient African spirituality, and mixed with all the way down to Christianity now, modern day, whatever beliefs, everybody gathered, no beef, no craziness, it's peaceful, the dancing, the drumming. It's a different Juneteenth because that's the one Juneteenth I've been to where there's not a lot of food and there's not performances. It's really a spiritual remembrance. So they go to the water, they put flowers in the water. It's a different kind of celebration. As I was saying, the celebrations are different depending on where you go, because people, whatever they value or whatever they know is what they'll bring to it.
So Michelle, I want to kind of turn to you to ask you this. The celebrations, as I understand it, originated in the South and then kind of moved north. What were the first celebrations like, and how did they really happen?
The first celebration, the actual first celebration was in 1866 in Texas by some formerly enslaved Texans, and they were hoping to celebrate publicly because it was a huge, announcement that we've been waiting for. As it was said, 2 years many enslaved African Americans did not know that they were free, so they would celebrate in a park where they had to purchase that land because they were not allowed to celebrate publicly. So the park was purchased, land was purchased, which is now a park, and they had celebrations of music, food, dancing, just spiritual hymns, anything possible to just celebrate freedom after not having a voice for so many years.
And that just was in Galveston?
That was in Houston. I believe that's in Houston, Texas. It's now called Emancipation Park to this day, and it still stands, and celebrations are still held there, and within the 49 states that now celebrate Juneteenth.
So there's a lot of the church, right, was really kind of a center for African American families. Cleo, we talked about that a little bit. We have a little more time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, the spiritual side of it?
Well, spirituality, unlike some people think, spirituality is a deep, deep part of African culture. No matter what it looks like, it's still spirit. Africans believe that there's spirit in everything: the trees, the water, the sun, the plants, everything. And so everything is honored. And so you bring take the plants and you take the energy of the plant and you make the medicine to heal your body. That's all spiritual, right? People didn't get that. And so the only thing that was allowed for people of African ancestry was religion. That's the only gathering you could have. That's the only time you could sing and dance and be happy. If you wanted to gather in a group, it had to be religious. And the religion that was allowed was Christianity. However, of course, African people are very creative. So the ancient practices were infused into whatever was allowed. But the fact that spirituality and the church was the hub of the community is not new for African people. So it stands to reason that Juneteenth would have come through the collaboration of those four churches, four men, and it came through the churches, and the members of the churches pooled their monies together and came up with that $1,000 to buy those 10 acres so that they can celebrate in peace without people telling them you can't be here.
So one of the things as Juneteenth moved to other states before it became a federal celebration, how did that happen, moving from Texas now up north to Miko? How did that happen?
Well, yeah, as people migrated from the South up north, they brought their customs with them and all the culture. So, Cleo mentioned and Michelle mentioned, celebrations were going on across the country, but, primarily in cities that had a large African-American population. So it never stopped, we just didn't hear about it because there weren't as many. I would say in the 90s is when we started hearing really more of a resurgence of, everywhere you went, every major city, New York City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, everybody was having some sort of Juneteenth celebration. It didn't become mainstream knowledge, again, because it was contained within the African American communities. But as more legislators started getting involved and asking that the holiday be recognized by the states, started at the state level, and then last year President Biden signed it into federal law. So. Just like everything else, it was cultures that were brought, from the South, brought up north, and just spawned from there.
Are there common themes to a celebration like that?
Yeah, music and food, and beautiful people.
So what kind of food? I'm just curious.
Well, of course, it's going to be centered around soul food, right? Because that's what is from our culture. But for example, at the Juneteenth celebrations that we have here in the Poconos, you can find any kind of food because remember, we all come from Africa, right? Everybody. That's where the birth of this nation started there. Whatever food you eat, whatever, it has some kind of basis in Africa, whether people want to, acknowledge that or not. But food has always been a central part of African American households anyway. People come together and eat, and it's always, there's a spiritual part of that, just, imbibing and enjoying food with your family and friends. And then drumming is a spiritual thing. I know for me, whenever I hear drums, it's like my body loses control and I'm ready to dance. I don't care where I am. My kids, if they're with me, they're like, we don't know her, kind of thing. Embarrassing. Right, yes. But I would say, definitely music, drumming, and food are essential, parts of any Juneteenth celebration.
In the building we're in, and it's a wonderful building. It's beautiful. It has a great history. Would this have been somewhere that Juneteenth could have been celebrated?
I wasn't here in 1865 when this building was erected, but I would imagine as the first church that African Americans had of their own in this area, that they did celebrate Juneteenth. I'm sure they had many jubilees here. I know that they had a very strong foundation in the church. This area had a pretty large African American population as well as Native American, and so they were all parishioners in this church. So I can imagine all kinds of wonderful celebrations. You know, unfortunately, we can't find many records. That's one of the struggles that we've been dealing with, is just trying to find more information. We put out pleas to the public that if anyone has any artifacts or any information about this church in the period, we'd be happy to have it. So.
And is it possible that this could have been a stop in the Underground Railroad or a structure around here, maybe?
Yeah, so according to the Philadelphia Historical Society, this building is a historical structure. They do believe that this was a stop in the Underground Railroad. There was plyboard on the floor that they believe that people would climb into a height under the building. And then also in their records, they show that escaped slave Henry Box Brown, somehow he managed to put himself into a box and get on a train and have himself shipped to Dansbury Depot. The Philadelphia Historical Association believes that Henry Box Brown may have attended this church, either, you know, maybe just a visit or maybe even stayed for a while. They're not sure, but yeah, so some interesting history.
Nichelle, in the community now, what does this church really stand for, do you think?
I actually feel touched that we're even having a Juneteenth discussion in this church, knowing the history of it. In the community now, we have huge Juneteenth celebrations. Kwanzaa Mama has been holding her celebration for years. It's a great, great day in the community. Food, music, as Tamiko said, drums, poetry, lots of food, as you can imagine.
The states who have recognized it, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, what have their celebrations looked like over time?
Various states have larger celebrations than others. Some states don't acknowledge it as much. But again, it depends on the individual and the groups that come together to create and start those celebrations. So again, in New York, huge celebrations, as Kwanzaa Mama mentioned. And then you'll find some states where some people don't even know of the holiday. So just the history of knowing that needs to be widespread.
So Nichelle, if somebody wants to find out more information about Juneteenth, what would you advise them to do? Because I know we've been talking about a lot of facts here, so we want to make sure everybody has the facts.
Okay, I would say Google, but you do find a lot of false information on Google. If they know a historian, a real, true historian, as our sister Kwanzaa Mama is as well, but a historian that can give them the history and someone that has experience for maybe grandparents or so, as well as possibly the National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. It's a bed of information on Black history. It's an amazing museum. Everyone needs to visit that regardless to what information they're looking for, anything on Black history.
One thing that kind of fascinates me too, talking about Juneteenth, all the things you've talked about kind of come forward with this. Mm-hmm. And you use the word Jubilee, right, or celebration. Mm-hmm. Why the word Jubilee? Why does that, Nichelle, I'm gonna ask you that. Why versus celebration or holiday? Is there a difference?
I would say it's a different type of celebration. It's a celebration of the freedom of an entire human race of people. So honestly, that alone just explains the word, how big of a celebration that is, how big of a celebration it should be, because an entire race of people were enslaved for years to come, and it was legal. So that dancing on ceilings, if I could, dancing upside down, that's the type of celebration that needs to take place, and that's what takes place today. And as we said, I hope it gets bigger and better. So yeah, that to me explains the type of celebrations.
Wow, that makes you truly understand it. It really, really does. You know, this has been really enlightening, and I know our viewers are going to really enjoy this, and I hope that they get a really strong message out of it, because they need to. And I want to thank all three of you for being here and taking your time to go to talk to us about Juneteenth, Bethel AME, and we're going to put some things on the screen as to where folks could really go if they like to find out about Bethel AME, because this is a beautiful building. It's got a great history. These folks are looking for some support, so keep that in mind as you visit the Pocono Mountains. But for this lovely panel here, Chris Barrett for PTN, the Pocono Television Network, and specifically you are just watching Pocono Perspectives. As always, thanks for watching.